This is BBC News. I'm Lebo Diseko. Our top stories. In step in Saudi Arabia, Donald Trump and King Salman signed multi-billion-dollar trade deals in what's described as a turning point in U.S.-Arab relations.
Hundreds of billions of dollars of investments into the United States and jobs, jobs, jobs.
President Trump is also awarded the kingdom's top civilian honor ahead of Sunday's major speech on Islam. Iran's President Hassan Rouhani says his re-election shows people want reform and greater engagement with the world. And the sister of the Duchess of Cambridge gets married, with the young royals sharing centre stage. Hello, good to have you with us. President Trump says that the first day of his visit to Saudi Arabia was tremendous after billions of dollars of trade deals were signed. The most significant was for arms to boost the Saudi military, which the White House has called the largest single arms deal in U.S. history. Mr. Trump got a warm welcome from King Salman, who rode with the president in his limousine and spent most of the day with him. His greeting included red carpets and some more traditional events as well. Our North America editor John Sopel is in Riyadh.
With the mercury touching 100 degrees Fahrenheit, Donald Trump probably found the blast of desert air refreshing compared to the political hothouse that he's left behind in Washington. He's hoping that this first foreign trip will provide some respite from the mounting problems at home. And what a welcome his host laid on for him. The 81-year-old king came to greet him, red carpet for as far as the eye could see. He was even given Saudi Arabia's highest civilian honour, a weighty thing. A marked contrast to the almost hostile reception afforded Barack Obama when he was last here.
Wherever you go in Riyadh, this is what you're going to see. Pictures of President Trump and King Salman with the slogan, "Together we prevail." A year ago, Donald Trump said in an interview, "I think Islam hates us." From the reception he's receiving and the warmth of it, you wouldn't guess it.
The new president's tough stance on Iran has endeared him to the Saudis and other Sunni nations in the region. And as part of that, a massive £75 billion arms deal was signed to supply the kingdom with weapons and know-how to meet the Iranian threat. And this allowed the president to talk about what he likes most, jobs.
That was a tremendous day. I just want to thank everybody, but tremendous investments into the United States, and our military community is very happy, and we want to thank you and Saudi Arabia. But hundreds of billions of dollars of investments into the United States and jobs, jobs, jobs.
At a news conference, the deal was welcomed by the Secretary of State.
This huge arms sales package on the United States to provide this same equipment to our own military forces, and will strengthen Saudi security forces for the future so that Saudi Arabia is more capable of carrying a greater share of the burden.
Less welcome news came overnight from James Comey. The sacked FBI director has accepted an invitation to give evidence to Congress in a public session, although that won't happen before this trip has concluded. According to the New York Times, the president described him to the Russian foreign minister as a nut job whose sacking had relieved a lot of the pressure on the president. Claims not denied. Donald Trump complained earlier this week that no politician had been treated worse or more unfairly than him. That is not something that could be said today. Though the composer of the national anthem probably could. John Sopel, BBC News, Riyadh.
Well, as you saw there, the Saudi king pulled out all the stops to make his guest feel at home. The huge arms deal signs comforting Houthi rebels in neighbouring Yemen. The United Nations says about 10,000 people have been killed since the fighting began in 2015. Yemen is on the verge of famine. 2 weeks ago, UN rapporteur accused Saudi Arabia of failing to investigate accusations that its forces carried out war crimes. Our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, is in Riyadh, and she's been speaking to the political analyst Salman al-Ansari.
You're following this trip with great interest. A lot of talk about shared interests, economic cooperation. Is that what young Saudis want to see?
Definitely. Actually, we're here in Saudi Arabia, despite actually the sandstorm that we are witnessing right now, there is a huge positive kind of vibe here in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The people and the government, you can tell that everybody is actually content with the fact that the U.S. administration chose Saudi Arabia to be the first foreign visit for them. That in itself has an unprecedented strategic importance, not only to the region, but to the overall global security, because we really need the United States to be back to the game. We need the United States to be basically helping its partners to combat terrorism and to confront the challenges we are facing. We are facing a lot of challenges. The Iranian-backed militias are all over the place. They are actually targeting not only the Middle Eastern nations, but also American interests, pure American interests. So it's very important for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the GCC countries and the Arab and Muslim world to open a complete new page with the new U.S. administration, so they can move forward and confront the challenges.
There was very much shared language between Rex Tillerson and Adel Al-Jubeir, talking about calling on Iran to end what they described as a network of terrorists, telling the newly re-elected President Hassan Rouhani that he had to do this if he wanted to change his relationship with the world. But there are some observers who believe that Saudi Arabia exaggerates the involvement of Iran across the region.
Actually, the idea that we are actually exaggerating the fact about Iran is actually, I don't see it to be accurate at all. Why? Because it's not only us saying that, it's actually the whole world is saying that. Just the Treasury Department just sanctioned Hezbollah in Syria. We are speaking of an Iranian regime that has more than 75 Iranian-backed militias just in Iraq. They are destabilizing Iraq. They are getting involved in Syria. They are killing more than 600,000 people in Syria and displacing 12 million people in Syria. So we are not exaggerating here. We are seeing some Houthi-backed militias, like Iranian-backed militias, who are the Houthis and Saleh, are actually operating in Yemen and killing civilians in a daily basis. We are not exaggerating. We are not exaggerating at all. We are putting our hands on the facts and nothing but the facts. And we need the whole world, the United States and the global community to basically confront Iran, because Iran is the root problem in the region. Not only in the region, but in the whole world.
Salman Al-Ansari, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us. And of course, this is a region where weather is always a metaphor for what's happening politically. This is what's happening on the evening of President Trump's visit. He's now dining luxurious reception with both Saudi and Western food for President Trump, the First Lady Melania Trump, Ivanka, who's attracting a lot of interest on social media, and of course the entire Trump team.
That was Lebo Diseko in Riyadh there, speaking to the political analyst Salman Al-Ansari. And we will be hearing from Amnesty International for their take on the president's visit. That's a little bit later on in this bulletin. All right, let's go to Iran now. And the newly elected president, Hassan Rouhani, says his country will seek greater international engagement and work towards a freer society. But the American Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, said the only way Iran could change its relationship with the world would be by ending its support for what he called destabilizing forces in the region. Here's our diplomatic correspondent, Paul Adams.
In the end, it wasn't even close. The pragmatic Hassan Rouhani winning comfortably. For reform-minded, middle-class voters, this was a significant victory. They came out in huge numbers, determined not to let hardliners take back the presidency. Iranians know their president is not a natural reformer, but they're weary of conflict and, in the cities at least, eager for change. Mr. Rouhani seemed to represent their best hope. Today, he thanked them and addressed the international community.
Today the world is well aware that the Iranian nation has chosen the path of interaction with the world, a path which is distant from extremism and violence. Our nation seeks to live in peace and friendship with the world, but is not ready to accept any disrespect or threat.
His biggest achievement to date, a nuclear deal signed with world powers 2 years ago. Today, one of those involved in the diplomacy said she welcomed the president's win.
I know how committed it is to continue the full implementation of the agreement, but also how committed he is to engaging with the international community.
But Iran's regional ambitions in the Middle East still complicate this difficult relationship. Iran remains a big supporter of Syria's President Assad. In neighbouring Lebanon, Iran supplies and sponsors the Hezbollah militia. In Yemen, it supports Houthi rebels, and its influence over the government in Iraq remains enormous. The Trump administration says Iran's missile program is another threat. New sanctions are being introduced. Speaking in Saudi Arabia, America's top diplomat delivered a warning.
What I would hope is that Rouhani now has a new term, and that he used that term to begin a process of dismantling Iran's network of terrorism, dismantling the manning and the logistics and everything that they provide to these destabilizing forces that exist in this region.
Whatever Mr. Rouhani wants, everyone knows it's this man, Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei, who calls the shots. There's only so much his president can do. Paul Adams, BBC News.
Dozens of schoolgirls who were kidnapped from the Nigerian town of Chibok 3 years ago have been reunited with their families. The girls were freed earlier this month as part of a deal between the Nigerian government and Boko Haram's Islamist militants. Our correspondent Alistair Leithhead has more on the emotional reunions in the Nigerian capital, Abuja.
The moment they'd been waiting more than 3 years for, to see each other again. An emotional reunion for the newly returned Chibok girls and their parents. 82 of the missing girls were released 2 weeks ago. It was a celebratory first meeting, but this is the start of a long process.
I cannot overemphasize how I feel. I'm just laughing, clapping my hand, all the family, because of happiness and joy.
Assimilating the back into society after being held hostage in the forest by Boko Haram militants. Both the girls and their parents have gone through a lot of change since the kidnapping. And they won't be heading back home to Chibok anytime soon. They're under the care of the Women's Affairs Ministry and the security services, keen to talk to them about their experiences. The BBC has been with the families in remote Chibok all this week. It's taken a while to make 100% sure of the girls' identities. This was the moment parents were asked to confirm from a photo that their girls were among those released.
Now, every parent have identified his and her daughter.
The 82 Chibok girls were only released after months of complicated negotiations. 5 Boko Haram commanders were exchanged for them. And the BBC's been told that €2 million may also have been part of the deal, but that can't yet be confirmed. The government says it's doing all it can, and talks are going on to try and release the 113 still being held. Their medical checks are continuing, and the girls will be given psychological therapy before starting their education again, amid tight security. We weren't allowed to ask them any questions. The intense media focus on the Chibok girls has at least helped many to be freed, and they are just some of the thousands of other women and girls also abducted by Boko Haram. Alistair Leithhead, BBC News, Nigeria.
Do stay with us here on BBC News, still to come. The stresses and strains of building robots. Just why were Africa's young science students putting their technical skills to the test?
This morning, an Indian Air Force plane carrying Mr. Gandhi's body landed in Delhi. The President of India walked to the plane to solemnly witness Mr. Gandhi's final return from the political battlefield.
The polling stations are all prepared for what will be the first truly free elections in Romania's history.
It was a remarkable climax to what was surely the most extraordinary funeral ever given to a pop singer.
It's been a peaceful funeral demonstration so far, but suddenly the police are tear-gassing the crowd. We don't yet know why.
The pre-launch ritual is well established here. Helen was said to be in good spirits, but just a little apprehensive.
In the last hour, East Timor has become the world's newest nation. It was a bloody birth for a poor country, and the challenges ahead are daunting. But for now, at least, it is time to celebrate.
You're watching BBC News, the latest headlines. President Trump has received an extravagant welcome during his first day of his visit to Saudi Arabia. He's expected to make a speech about Islam on Sunday. All right, let's stay with that story. And joining me now is Amnesty International's Middle East specialist, Jeffrey Mock. He joins us live from Duke University in North Carolina. I know you haven't heard quite what you wanted to hear from Donald Trump, have you?
No, we haven't. We've heard arms sale that we consider irresponsible and dangerous.
Just explain a little bit why.
Well, the Saudi government has a pattern of war crimes, many of them using weapons bought from the U.S. and the United Kingdom. That makes the U.S. complicit in these war crimes. This pattern will only continue, we're very concerned, if this sale goes through. At the same time, these crimes are leading to thousands of Yemenis leaving their homes, thousands of civilians' deaths. At the same time that President Trump is trying to restrict the Yemenis from coming to the United States. So he's causing problems at both ends. He's complicit in the war crimes that are causing people to flee from home, and he's complicit in preventing them from leaving the country. I mean,
the term war crimes is pretty serious, and I'm sure it's a term that the Saudis would dispute, and also their allies as well. I mean, the UK and also previous administrations in the United States have raised this in private, they've said. President Obama was fairly public in his criticism of the Saudi Arabians' human rights record. It didn't do much good, did it?
It did not, but we also saw an uneven message, and a message that wasn't actually reflected in policy. Year in, year out, the U.S. State Department did a human rights report that echoed a lot of the messages and concerns that Amnesty International did, but it never got reflected in policy. And in terms of public statements, the last time President Obama went to the Saudi Arabian, he never raised human rights issues. It was something that they tried and would step back whenever they saw an obstacle. It needs a long-standing work in cooperation with the Saudis. We're not asking the U.S. to stop talking to the Saudis. We're asking them to continue and keeping human rights on the agenda on a long-term basis.
I suppose what President Trump would say is that he was elected as president of the American people. He has said he puts America first, and a key issue at the moment is security in that region.
An American first policy would not make America complicit in potential war crimes. It would also not lead to further instability in a region where the U.S. taxpayers already spent billions of dollars trying to resolve human rights abuses and war crimes, and also led to the loss of thousands of American soldiers in that region. An American first policy would reflect our values of individual freedom and the rights outlined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
All right, Jeffrey Mock, we're going to have to leave it there, but we do appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brazil's embattled president says an investigation into his alleged obstruction of justice needs to be suspended. In a defiant speech, Michel Temer said that the audio in which he allegedly discusses the payment of hush money to a jailed politician needed to be checked for tampering and audio edits.
Today we're making a request at the Supreme Court to suspend the proposed probe until the authenticity of the clandestine tape can be definitely proven.
Well, the scandal has engulfed Brazilian politics, with a third of Mr. Temer's cabinet under investigation for alleged corruption. Mr. Temer is already deeply unpopular in Brazil, but his centre-right party has been able to govern as part of a coalition. Opposition parties have demanded his resignation and snap elections.
The government is bleeding and paralysed, and we at the Brazilian Socialist Party, having already taken a stand against the reforms, are demanding the President's immediate resignation.
Well, our correspondent in Rio, Julia Cañero, has been following the story.
There's a lot that's in play here, and there are very serious allegations that have emerged as part of, well, they emerged actually from a series of testimonies that were made as part of a plea bargain by executives of JBS. This is the big meat producer in Brazil. So the Supreme Court has authorized investigations against him, and we'll still have to wait to see the result of that. But today, President Temer tried to divert attention from that. He defended himself, denying again the allegations, but he also cast doubt about the testimonies, saying that they are incoherent, that they were false, and also casting lots of doubt over that audio. Now, this taped recording is really at the heart of this scandal because it shows President Temer talking to the powerful CEO of GBS. This is a man called Joesley Batista. And Mr. Temer appears to be endorsing the payment of bribes to obstruct corruption investigations. So that really triggered this big scandal here. And he said that this audio had been manipulated, that it has to be verified, which is being done at the moment. Lots of media outlets here have called in specialists to have a listen. There's doubt about whether its integrity can be proved or not, but Mr. Temer is trying to hold on to that to prove his innocence. And it's just a detail in the middle of all the allegations that have really come out from these testimonies.
Julia Cañero there. Now, the finals of the Pan-African robotics competition came to an end on Saturday. More than 200 students from schools in Senegal, Mali and the Gambia took part in a contest of engineering and electrical skills. This was an event that saw the success for boys and girls in the capital, Dakar, as Tim Allmond explains.
At this stadium in Senegal, they are thinking big. Robotic creations line up, ready for battle, metaphorically at least, some flying the flag. Boys and girls working on the robots they created.
I know a lot of people who might have not want to come here, but they came here and they enjoyed it and they loved it. I even think, I spoke to one of my friends and they said that they want to change careers. Now they want to become an engineer with robots and everything. So I think our generation is definitely the generation for it.
All the competitors were aged between 11 and 19. Their unique inventions faced with various tasks of mechanical dexterity. It's almost too much to bear for some of them. And this is about so much more than just simple robotics.
They come out of this loving science, loving engineering, and this is with our goal really. How can we push these kids to love science and technology so they become future leaders in science and engineering in Africa and solve the societal problems of Africa?
A bold ambition resting on the shoulders of this next generation. But the organisers say this is about changing lives and inspiring young Africans to be leaders in science and technology. Tim Allmond, BBC News.
Here in Britain, media from around the world flooded a small English country town to catch a glimpse of the society wedding of the year. Pippa Middleton, the sister of Catherine, the Duchess of Cambridge, got married. Kate's children, Prince George and Princess Charlotte, were page boy and flower girl. Our royal correspondent, Nicholas Witchell, has more.
A society wedding, a chance to, well, to gawp at the guests, for one thing. Interesting for some, others may feel perhaps a little indifferent to it all. But of course this was rather more than a society wedding with celebrity guests like tennis champion Roger Federer, because this was a Middleton family wedding, so a wedding with royal connections. Big sister Catherine arrived with 2 carloads of bridesmaids and page boys. Among them were Prince George, his hand firmly being held by his mother, and Princess Charlotte. They were ushered into church, ready for the arrival of the bride. Pippa Middleton was driven to church in an open-topped car with her father Michael. It rekindled memories of how it was 6 years ago, when Pippa played such a memorable supporting role at Catherine's wedding at Westminster Abbey. Today she was the one pausing at the entrance for the photographers. in a dress which fashion editors will spend pages describing. At the church door, the roles were reversed. It was Kate lending the sisterly support, making sure the dress was as it should be. Then, with a final pat on the shoulder, it was time for the service to begin. Less than an hour later, the church bells sounded and page boy George led the way out of church, scattering flower petals, as the new Mr. and Mrs. James Matthews emerged together as man and wife. Somewhere in the family group were Princes William and Harry. Despite speculation in the press, Harry had not brought his girlfriend Meghan Markle to the wedding. Had he done so, it would have overshadowed everything. And this was a day when the focus was on this couple and their wedding. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News, Englefield.
Beautiful, Brad. Don't forget, you can get in touch with me and the rest of the team on Twitter. I'd love to hear from you. I'm at Lebo_Diseko. That's all we have time for. Thanks for watching BBC News.